Okay. Theory of rent is basically a part of uh, the input market that we were studying. So in one aspect we studied, in one part we studied the labor market under perfectly competitive scenario. But theory of rent is very different from that. It's to say it's an old theory, okay, and it obviously involves a lot of verbal logic and a very little of mathematics, so to say. So the experience of studying theory of rent is very different from all the other micro topics that you have studied. All right, so let's start. So the first we'll start with economic rent. Okay, just to differentiate between the fact that probably the rent that someone pays staying in a house is I mean, it involves obviously economic rent, but economic rent is not only that. So first, let us look at the definition. Okay. So the I put it in bracket because we can simply write rent also, and it will not change the thing. So the economic rent earned by a factor of production, earned by a factor of production, which tells us that we are in input market, right? Is the total amount is the total amount by which payments to the factor, so whatever that may be, we will later go into which factors actually constitutes our list. Okay, because uh, I mean, as far as rent earning rent is concerned, there is no strict kind of uh, barricade of this factor will be there and this factor will not. Okay, so all of the factors given some conditions can actually earn rent. Okay, it depends on the situation. So total amount by which payments to the factor exceed exceed the minimum amount necessary to keep the minimum amount necessary to keep it in its present employment. Okay, so let us look at some of the important phrases here. First of all is whatever rent may be, it is earned by factor of production. So obviously, we have a basic, we have an application of the basic demand supply model involving a factor of production here. That is obviously true. Then this idea of exceeding the minimum amount. So the amount received, if it exceeds the minimum amount, then we have that extra part will constitute rent. So there is an idea of going over, and if you read between these lines, this exceed basically kind of give you a hint that probably we are talking about surplus, and in a way we are indeed talking about surplus. Okay, and to that extent we have learned producer surplus, we have learned consumer surplus. When it comes to factor of production, it has a strong connection obviously with producer surplus. So we'll explore that. Lastly, it says in its present employment. That means down the line we are talking about also some kind of an alternative employment which is not at present, which is in which it is not employed. So there is a present employment, and when you are mentioning exclusively or explicitly rather the present term, that means also that the idea of rent is connected to the idea of opportunity cost, which talks about the foregone cost of being in present employment, right? Okay, so uh, let us go deeper into the idea of rent. Okay, and later we'll be connecting it with both surplus and employment, and to that extent we will also connect it to supply curve. Okay, when it comes to market structure, the idea of rent can be easily connected to a monopolist. Okay, and obviously sensibly speaking monopolist is the only one in the market as a seller. So obviously because of monopolists monopoly power or the source of monopoly power, one can expect or one can rightly expect that the monopolist can earn rent. Okay, and it does. So the first example that we take is of a monopolist. Okay, someone who works alone. So as for example, the profit the profit earned by a monopolist the profit earned by a monopolist in the long run, the profit earned by a monopolist in the long run is or rather constitutes rent, and it is and it is attributed and it is attributed to that factor and it is attributed to that factor which is which is the basis for monopoly power. Which is the basis for monopoly power. Okay. All right. Now we'll look into a demand supply diagram. The first and simplest exposition. It's a pretty simple diagram. So demand and then supply. And following the notation, let's say this is so if this is yeah quantity, then let's say this is Q bar, and instead of price, or let's say this is price, yeah, this is price, but for the timing, let us denote by some V bar. Okay, and this is equilibrium. So all right, now also let us intersect the supply curve in the with the horizontal axis and denote it as S. Okay, so let's start. So the supply curve the supply curve is positively sloped, is positively sloped on the assumption, that higher factor prices, or for that matter actually higher prices, but for our purpose we'll write higher factor prices will induce, higher factor prices will induce suppliers to offer more services. Okay, so that's the usual scenario with supply, right? And analogously, demand curve, demand curve is taken as negatively sloped. So we have our usual scenario here. Okay. Now, coming from our idea of marginal cost, okay, coming from our idea of marginal cost, and that the supply curve is indeed in a competitive setup, it is indeed the marginal cost curve. We can write the following. We can write that the total amount of money, the total amount of money required to, the total amount of money required to retain the level Q bar, the level Q bar in the present employment, in the present employment is given by this area, right? Area under the MC curve. So given by area S O Q bar E. Okay. Right. Because from the MC curve idea, it is quite obvious. But we know that in a perfectly competitive setup, what happens is everybody gets paid the same amount. Right. Okay. Again, in competitive markets, all units of a factor is paid the same price. And here that price is V bar. Okay. And this price is determined this price is determined by what the farm pays to the last unit hired. Right? So you go by the money required to retain, and you go to the last unit. And for the last unit, you are ready to pay V bar. Now, in a competitive market, everybody gets the same price. So everybody gets V bar, right? So that means what? That means we have economic rent here, because this curve shows the minimum amount that is necessary to keep these labors, these units below Q bar to keep in this employment. But end of the day, the market ends up by paying each of them much higher, that is V bar. But last uh, for the last unit employed, it becomes the same. So so if we say, so the marginal unit, okay, the end unit for that person or for that unit, there is no gap between the amount of money that is necessary to keep him in employment and the amount that is paid to him. Right? And this idea will be extended to other discussions of rent also. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. All right. So let us finally just write what is the rent here. So what is happening? As all other units, and that means except the last unit. So as all other units receive a return V bar and would have settled for something less, retaining the current employment, retaining the current employment these intermarginal, sorry, not inter, intramarginal. So these intramarginal, INTRA, so these intramarginal suppliers enjoy an economic rent. An economic rent, right? So total factor payments is V bar, you know it, right? V bar, the origin, Q bar, and E. And earlier we saw the amount that is necessary. So total rent is the gap, and total rent is V bar SE. And as you can see from your past knowledge, that essentially we are talking about surplus. So what is the idea from a practical point of view, how this idea of rent enjoyed by this intramarginal suppliers is coming into the picture? It's pretty simple. The idea is that if this if it were the case that the farm will need only one labor, then the scenario would have been very different. But the farm actually wants to uh, employ this much of labor, right? Q bar amount of labor. And now, if you go for discrimination, that is, if you could have dealt with uh, each of them separately, then probably you would have paid according to the MC curve. Rather, you would have paid according to the MC curve. But here, as you want this much employment, and as this is a competitive setup, you end up paying all of them the amount that is necessary to pay the last unit, and thereby all the others enjoy the economic rent. Okay, something that is not coming from their contribution towards the production, but something else. Okay. Now, obviously, the idea has a strong connection with the shape of the supply curve. So let me draw just two diagrams. So for example, if I have a diagram where the supply curve is this and the demand curve is this, okay, then, and if this is your Q bar, this is your V bar, what is the economic rent here? A big zero. Right? And then again, if I have drawn a vertical supply curve and a demand curve, okay, then what will happen? This total amount will be rent. And what do you observe from these three diagrams? Two things. Number one is that we have a strong connection between the economic rent that is being generated and the elasticity of supply. This is first. The second thing is that end of the day, the idea is very much related to the scarcity of that resource. That is, whether it is limited in supply or not. So, for example, in the extreme case, when all of the payment becomes essentially rent, what we see is that we have a vertical supply curve. That means the resource is limited to Q bar. So even if you want, you cannot get more than Q bar, right? And that makes the whole scenario more towards having economic rent. Whereas if I have a horizontal supply curve, this scenario is completely opposite, right? And because of that, the rent becomes zero. So let us write down those results. So we'll come to a bigger discussion on this one, but let's just write them down. So in essence, we have got this result, of which the other two diagrams are just extreme cases. So what is the result? The more elastic the supply curve, the more elastic the supply curve for a factor, the more elastic the supply curve for a factor, the smaller the area, that represents economic rent. Economic rent. Okay. And so we have just drawn two special cases of it. So let's just write them down. We are going to keep this diagram with a vertical supply curve because it has other usage. So we can have two sub results, and the first one is that for an infinitely, or as we say perfectly, so for an infinitely elastic curve, or rather let us write like supply curve, because that's important. So for an infinitely elastic supply curve, there is no economic rent. There is no economic rent. With that, we have another result which says for a perfectly inelastic supply curve, for a perfectly inelastic supply curve, all of the returns all of the returns to a factor all of the returns to a factor constitutes rent. Okay. All right. Now we'll go to another topic, another topic which is called quasi rent. So what is quasi rent? Quasi means basically quasi. The quasi term is used to say not, right? So not rent, and not rent basically doesn't mean it is not rent. It is rent, but it doesn't remain always rent. So for example, if we take this idea of fixed in supply, the immediate example that comes in our mind is obviously land, and we will tackle land is in the most elaborate manner. But there is something also which we talked about fixed in supply, that is capital. But there is only a catch. The catch is that we assumed capital to be fixed in the short run and not in the long run. So that means what? That means capital is something which, whether it brings in rent or not, that depends on uh, sort of time length, if we can say that. Although that's not, yeah, sort of we can say that. So basically, given a time period, we can observe that capital earns rent. But when we elongate that, when we move from short run to long run, capital becomes variable and it doesn't really earn rent. So here with capital, we have an idea of rent which is not always observable. And that is why this term quasi rent. Okay. All right. So as we expect, short run earnings short run earnings of any reproducible factor. And this is interesting, reproducible factor. But we says short run. That means although this factor is reproducible, it is not reproducible in the short run. So reproducible factor of production is quasi-rent. And yes, the easiest example is heavy machinery. That is, in general speaking, physical capital. Heavy machinery. Okay. So it is quasi-rent. It is quasi-rent because this rent disappears. This rent disappears in the long run. Okay. So in other words, what we are saying is that for non-reproducible units, for non-reproducible inputs, for non-reproducible inputs, economic rent is both a short run and a long run phenomenon. Okay. Now we will move on to a very famous term which is called rent-seeking behavior. And this idea of rent-seeking behavior is connected to the generation of rent, which is there because of government rulings. And it's not that because government rulings or rules or laws generates rent, they are bad. It's not like that. But yes, they do generate rent. Okay. And one of the easy example of government's restriction is let me write it here, is liquor license is the easiest example. Okay. And in future in Indian economy, you will see, if you study, I don't know whether it is still now there, it's called license Raj or licensing behavior and sort of that. So in that you will see a lot of rent-seeking behavior. Although rent-seeking behavior is quite easy to see, easy to observe. Okay. Anyways, so why such rents exist? So rents may exist because of government restrictions. Government restrictions put through legal barriers into the entry into the entry into an industry. Okay. So one of the other example is also, opening a pharmacy shop. For that, you need the licensed pharmacist. Okay. So one has to be a licensed pharmacist to apply for a pharmacy shop. Obviously, you know that uh, although as a criteria that is satisfied, it's not really the fact that the chief shop owner, let's say, whom you observe or whom you see at a pharmacy shop every time, or he or she is an M farm or B farm for that matter, and rarely they are. But anyways, the idea is that there are legal barriers, and legal barriers basically leads to what we call lobbying. It leads to lobbying. Okay. And this lobbying generates rent. Okay. So how can we write then what is a rent seeking behavior? So efforts for achieving efforts for achieving or keeping claims on factors of production on factors of production which are fixed in supply which are fixed in supply are called rent seeking are called rent seeking. But as you can understand that from a social point of view, the expenditure that is borne by this rent seeking activity is basically a wastage. And for that matter, there is a very thin line gap between what is called lobbying and what is called bribing. There's a very thin line gap, and obviously, the US law is far more, let's just say, crisp on this, but obviously, the Indian law is not. And one of the good example of this is, you see, Walmart. When Walmart tried to enter in India, I think for the second time, the some government departments found out, spreading of money at the level of, I think, at the level of 1,000 crore or 100 or 1,000 crore, something like that, of that amount. So when they said that Walmart tried to actually bribe some of the politicians and administrative officials and some business person, Walmart said that no, it never actually tried to bribe anybody, but it was actually lobbying to get an entry into the retail market of this country. Okay, so by that example, you can understand that although we are saying the behavior of Walmart is a rent-seeking behavior, and you can understand why such a rent-seeking behavior is being generated, because there are legal barriers. Walmart was finding it difficult to enter, so it started, achieving. It tried to achieve the claims not on factors of production, obviously, but it tried to achieve the entry to the industry. And why it is rent seeking? Because the very the very activity generates a situation where there is economic rent. Okay, that's why it is rent seeking. It's not that Walmart is asking for rent. I mean, it's not that Walmart has to pay some rent or something, but the way it tries to achieve what it wants to achieve, given this legal barriers and scenarios, it generates a of situation having economic rent. So this is why it's a rent seeking behavior. Okay, so in the process of it, it generates rent. Okay, so as we said at the very start, looking at the definition, that rent has a connection with opportunity cost. Now we will explore that. So rent and opportunity cost. Okay, now we have connected rent to the elasticity of supply, and we will start with connecting that elasticity of supply with this idea of opportunity cost. So a factor of production a factor of production which has many alternative uses will have a elastic supply curve, right? And for that matter, we'll have a very elastic supply curve. Although let's just write elastic supply. Very is not a very okay. So elastic supply curve. And that's expected, right? Because it has alternative uses, so it can just move on. So in such a case, economic rent will be small. And we know that. But if we go about this idea of many alternative uses, then we get another interpretation apart from this elasticity, which is that will be small because the factor earns little excess, because the factor earns little in excess of what it may earn elsewhere. And one of the best example is clerical workers, basically clerks. So clerical workers. And why? Because clerical workers have numerous employment opportunities. Numerous employment opportunities. And they earn similar in each of those employments. So basically, we can just write it, that is low economic rent. Right. Okay. But what if we have a factor who is very much production specific? Then the scenario is quite the opposite. And again, the connection, obviously, as you can understand, it is made through the elasticity of supply curve of such a factor. Okay. So in contrast, some factors are of limited use. Some factors are of limited use in the sense that they have very high productivity in one employment and very low productivity elsewhere. So as you can guess, in this case, the supply curve to this employment, this is important, to this employment, okay, is perfectly inelastic. I mean, if not perfectly, actually we must write highly inelastic, not really. Perfectly is a very strong statement. So let's write highly inelastic. So highly inelastic. And then obviously the resulting, or not resulting, we should write the associated economic rent, the associated economic rent will be hence quite high. Quite high. And is given by the difference between, and it is given by the difference between the earnings of the factor and its opportunity cost. Okay. So what is the idea? In a nutshell, if we connect with opportunity cost, is that when the opportunity cost is almost same to the current employment, the rent is low. And when the opportunity cost is quite low, or rather, yeah, when the opportunity cost is quite low compared to the current employment, then the rent is really high, because as we said that the valuation has is connected to opportunity cost, right? And if the person employed is being paid very something high and above the opportunity cost, then obviously that part constitutes the rent. The classic example of this is one from non-fiction, Einstein, right? Employed as a physicist and employed as somebody playing violin. And from fiction, Sherlock Holmes, employed as a consulting detective and employed as a violin player. So for each of them, the earning, if they had gone for violin, would have been very low. And they were quite specialized in their job, and obviously their supply was highly inelastic. So what they enjoyed mostly is rent. Okay. So in a sense, the idea again brings us back to the simplistic thought that if it is too much in supply, then obviously the rent will be low, and if it is really scarce, if it is limited, if it is rare, then rent will be high. Okay, so now we'll move on to that resource which is definitely limited. I mean, it's not that it does not change. It's not that its amount does not change, but that change, there is no point of including that as a change, so to say, because that is infinitesimal compared to its actual outstanding amount. And it is the discussion of that. It is because we want to discuss that we kept this diagram intact. So we are talking about land and rent. Okay. So now we will start rent with respect to land, and it's the best example because land obviously is in limited supply. So consider the total area of land of a country. The supply curve is a vertical line as land is fixed in supply. Right? Okay. Now let us refer to this diagram. So if demand is D1, D1, okay? So if demand is D1, the rental price, of land per unit is V1. So let us change this to V1, okay? And total return to the owner is V1 OSE. So let us name them properly. Or not S, sorry, V1 O, and we need another point. So let's say E1 here. So V1 O Q bar E1. Okay, so this area is the total return. So that is the total amount of rent. Okay, now if demand increases to D2, that is, we are talking of a shift. So let's say this is the shift. We have the new equilibrium, and obviously the price will be some V2. So if demand increases to D2, the equilibrium rental price becomes V2, which generates a return of, so this time it will be V2 O Q bar E2, right? Okay, yeah. This amount and the earlier amount. So that means what? That means that the increase in demand has no effect other than making the landowner richer. Right? Now, note that this change in rent is entirely due to change in demand. Supply has no role at all because it is fixed, right? But what does it mean? This means And this is one of the important result that we have here. And the result is rent is price determined and not a price determining factor and not a price determining factor for the economy as a whole. For the economy as a whole. So what do you mean by that? What I mean is that first we determined the price V1 and then we saw that this entire amount is rent. And in the next session or in the next change also, we first determine the price, and after the price is determined, we determined what is the amount of rent. So that means unless I determine the price, I cannot get what is the amount of rent. So rent is, that is why rent is price determined. So had the price been something higher than V2, we would have had a higher value of rent. But rent does not determine price. Okay, as you can see, because the idea of calculating the rent, that doesn't come into the picture unless we consider we determine the price first. All right, but there is a different scenario which changes this consideration of rent altogether, and the arena where it appears, it plays a very important role. What is that? For a farmer, the value of the land, that is rent, the value of the land is a part of cost of production. Which, that is, by which I mean the land, which otherwise would be taken away, by other farms in the industry. Right? So you actually have to spend money to keep the land with you so that you can harvest something. Okay. Therefore, from a farmer's point of view, from a farmer's point of view, the value of land is a cost and not rent, is a cost that enters into the pricing of the produce. So there you have a scenario where the role of land is very different, right? It's not rent, it's a cost of production. And in this case, the rent that is involved in the land, in the employment of the land, it actually determines the pricing. Okay, so now to that extent, then the question is that how can we, keep the discussion ongoing, in the sense that here when I'm saying farmer's land, one of the important component that comes is the fertility, right? And depending on fertility, the value of land changes. Right. So fertility of land becomes a very important component. And since fertility is of various degrees, one cannot simply use the word rent. So for that, we have an idea which is called differential rent. Okay. Differential rent. An idea which is put forward by David Ricardo. And we study that next. So now we start the Ricardian theory of rent. Otherwise, we can say that rents earned on different tracts of land. And as to the use of the word different, we mean fertility. Fertility. Okay. So David Ricardo argued that more fertile land tended to extract higher rent. So that's the sort of hypothesis, you can say. So the rents, therefore, that are related to the fertility of the land and crops grown is called differential rent. Okay. And what is the result, so to say? Apart from this one, the result is that the additional land of inferior quality, would be cultivated would be cultivated up to the point at which the last acre, just saying as a unit, the last acre planted earns exactly zero economic rent. Exactly zero economic rent. And if you compare this result with the idea of MC curve and the diagram that you have drawn earlier, you will understand that this result holds true. Okay. So what it basically says is, as long as you earn positive rent, you keep on adding lands of less fertile lands, because obviously, given Ricardo argument, the less fertile land will bring in lesser rent. So you keep on going to the less fertile land till the point where it earns zero economic rent. Okay. So we'll take an example in the end, and we'll see uh, how such a result holds its ground. And not only that, in doing that, we'll also learn how to calculate rent when you have different levels of fertile land. Okay. So from this result, we can also say that we can say something else also. For example, you can say that economic rent, the economic rent on more fertile land, the economic rent on more fertile land is positive. Right? The economic rent in more fertile land is positive, and represented by a return that is based on the land's higher quality. The land's higher quality. Okay. So here also we get another result similar to which we stated earlier, that is, rent is not a determinant of market price. So in Ricardian theory also we have that is not a determinant of market price, but prices are determined by market demand and by the availabilities of fertile land. Okay, so let us draw a diagram and better understand what we are talking about. Okay, so on the rightmost diagram, we have the demand curve and the supply curve. So this is the quantity, let's say, some capital Q bar. Here I have the equilibrium and here I have the price P. Okay. So now what are we talking about here? We are saying that depending on the fertility of land, things will change. Now, how to represent the fertility of land? Okay, that's very important. So we say that the fertility of land is basically represented by the average cost that you bear, and to that extent, it's the we are talking about essentially long run. Okay. So if we extend, let's say, this price line, okay, then the scenario that we are talking about is that so this is the least fertile land. Okay, let's say this is Q3, and here you have a slightly better scenario. Right? The price is above the AC curve and equal to MC. And here you have an even better scenario. Okay. Now, the gap that you observe, there is zero economic profit here, and then supernormal profit here. We are saying that this is occurring because the fertility is increasing as we move on the left side. Okay. So here, fertility basically implies lower AC, lower AC curve. All right. So that's how you earn rent in a highly fertile land. You earn a positive rent in a fertile a land which is not that fertile, and the process goes till the point where you earn zero economic rent. So this is your, as we can say, this is your marginal producer. Right? The producer who produces at the margin, in the sense that the economic rent that the producer earns from the land is zero. Okay. So now 2 points that we'll note is number one is that first of all that the unplanted land must be of even lower quality. than that of the marginal producer. And number two, the equilibrium is stable in the long run, since it will be since it will be impossible for the entrant, or let's say for the new entrant, to earn a profit. Okay. So that means, what is the barrier here? So the quality of land is a natural barrier to entry. And this is how it leads to rent, but obviously differential rent, in the sense that the amount of rent, as you can see, it changes. Okay. So this means a lot of other things also. For example, this means, and we can safely write that also as a result, that the demand for land, the demand for land is derived from the product market. And that is expected because it's an input, right? So obviously it will have derived demand, much like for labor and capital. It will have a derived demand curve. Okay. But one important point is that Ricardian theory is applicable. Ricardian theory is applicable to any type of input, that earns a surplus. And this is the argument which kind of connects the idea of rent that we started with, when we said that it's an underlying notion of surplus, and the Ricardian theory of rent that was put forward years ago. Okay. All right. So now let us take a very concrete kind of an example and calculate the rent that will result. So calculation of rent. Okay. So let us draw a diagram in which on one hand we measure Q and on the other we measure MC. Okay. And let's just say that the first unit, for that the marginal cost is, let's say, 6. Okay. Okay. All right. So we start with that. So the first unit is produced with MC equal to 6, and with second unit MC becomes 8. So let's say this is 2. Let's just say this is 8. Okay. All right. Now, with competition, the return on with competition, the returns on different units of output cannot be different, right? Cannot be different. And to that extent, the price charged will be 8, right? So this is our setup. So the price charged, it will be 8. But that means what? That means the producer will earn a rent of rupees 8 minus 6, that is rupees 2 on first unit. Correct? Right? So that means the amount maybe that is represented by this area here, Roman I, this represents the rent. Okay. Now let us extend it and just add a third unit. So with the third unit, MC becomes, so let's say MC, okay, so MC equal to 12. So let's say this is our 12 and this is our third unit. Right? So, okay. So now what we have? Hence, rent earned on first unit is rupees 12 minus 6, that is rupees 6, and on second unit is rupees 12 minus 8, that is rupees 4. Right? And how will that will measure that rent? So it will be this area 2. Uh, uh, yeah. Obviously, in this area 2, we will have a sub part, right? Now that first unit's rent will be designated by this and also this, and second unit's rent will be this space, right? Okay. All right. So that means what? That means the total area showing rent is Roman 1 plus Roman 2. Now just try to understand that this rent, I mean, this is indeed rent because this rent is a transfer payment. Is a transfer payment and not a real cost of labor or raw materials. Okay. So the cost that you earn on the marginal is because you want to produce more, not because you were producing a unit earlier. Okay. So because of that, the rent in the first case it will be rupees 2. So that is earned. It is as if it is transferred just because both the goods they earn they are sold for the same price, and it keeps on going like this. Okay. So by that, the resource cost, is rupees 6 plus 8 plus 12, which is rupees 26, and obviously the rent comes separate. Which we can designate by the area 3, the area 4, and the area 5. So that is area 3 plus 4 plus 5. Okay. So now we have what we started with, that basically if we what we did is we essentially plotted the marginal cost here, right? And to that extent we call rent to be the surplus. Okay. So if we draw the diagram that we started with, so if we say that this is the marginal cost curve, okay, and if this is the point where this cost is being, this amount is being produced, this is the point of production, and if the MC is A, this is A, then, and in a competitive market, this A will equal to basically price. So although you could have paid only this much, the earning involves this and the area above. So basically, we reached what we wanted to reach, that is the producer's surplus is the rent. Okay, and to that extent, we have a very famous result, and the result is this: the average cost, the AC, the AC of output level, it's a Q, precluding rent, that is the calculation of average cost, already involves rent. Okay, we can remove this. Let the diagram be there. Okay, so the average cost of output level Q, precluding rent, is equal to the MC of that level of output excluding rent. Okay. So, given our example, so from the example, MC excluding rent, for third unit, it was rupees 12. And for the second unit, it was rupees 8. And for the first unit, it was 6. Now, if Q bar is equal to 3, what is the MC of excluding rent? It is equal to rupees 12. Okay. Now, if I calculate the AC, including rent, then for third unit it is rupees 12. For the second unit it is rupees 8 plus rupees 4 as rent. And for the first unit it is rupees 6 plus again rupees 6 for rent. So if I calculate AC, as I said, precluding rent, that is, first I consider rent as well as the cost of production, the MC of production. And if I sum the total cost up, and if I find the AC, what will that be? It will again be 12, right? So AC of Q bar equal to 3, precluding rent. Okay. So let me just reiterate it again. If I consider rent along with the price, or along with the cost rather, okay, and if I calculate AC out of that, then that AC will be equal to the MC of producing that level of output, that is Q bar equal to 3, excluding the rent. And remember, this result holds at all levels of output. It doesn't matter. We have just shown it using an output level of 3, but it holds true for all the levels. Okay.